down in Argentina. And the face flipper was 220 volts. Now that I'm back in the States, it won't run from an adapter because the voltage is different, because it's just a simple AC motor. I also got this step down transformer so I could run my soldering iron while I was in Argentina. This does 200 watts from 220 down to 120 or 110. But now that I'm back in the States, everything has to go in reverse, so I took it apart, and it really is just a simple, 220 goes in here, and there's double the windings, so you get 110 out the other side. So if I just run it in reverse, then it will step up the voltage to 220. It'll support the motor of my clipper, and then I might be able to trim my mustache. My plan is to put the whole transformer into a little project box with a switch that I can switch between 110 and 220 input, and then have a different plug for the output. Here's the parts that I'm going to need beyond the transformer for this project. I got a little project box here from Radio Shack, a simple 2-outlet plug from the hardware store. This is probably the most critical part. It's a double pole, double throw switch. So you have 2 input poles here, if you can see that. Inputs go into the center, and then so right now this input is going to there, and this input is going to there. And I switch it, these 2 go to the other side. I'll show you in the schematic in a minute what that's for. And then just like a power plug that I can co-op. AC is going to go in here. This could be either 220 or 110 input to the double throw switch. Initially, it will be on one side. Let's say it's 110 coming in from my house here. That's going to go feed the primary of the transformer. Double the voltage, and then you'll get 220 out of this plug. This plug will still serve 110, but it may not be a good idea to have both things plugged in at the same time. The opposite happens when you flip the switch. Down here, now the 110 volts, in this case, goes up to this, which would be the primary on the transformer going the other direction. This is 110 volts still, and now it's stepped down to 55 volts. I wouldn't really do that in this situation, but this would be where you could use it backwards. If I went back to Argentina, I could send the 220 in here, and then it would step it down to 210 like the original transformer. So I can have it going both ways. And sort of the plug that's not being used is serving the same voltage that the input is. So it should be a pretty simple thing to wire up. In terms of the layout, I'm just going to have this plug in here behind here, and I'll use the Dremel to cut out nice little openings for the outlets, and just put a screw at the top and the bottom, and then the switch will go here. And I'll wire it, even though it's somewhat reversed on the schematic, I'm going to wire it so that 110 in, if this is pointing down, this will be 110, 110, switch it up, 220, 220, so that there's no confusion.
So first I'm going to lay out the position of each of the parts on the board, and then once they're all in the place, I'm going to mark them with a scribe. See that mustache creeping in there? Needs to be handled. Then it's just a simple act of dremeling out the individual holes. And then just cleaning up everything. Finally finishing it up with the file so that it's a nice fit. Here I'm removing the tab that separates the 2 plugs so that they can each be on a different circuit. This is important. And then drilling the holes to mount the plug to the panel. And probably not the best thing to do, but I needed to widen the holes a little bit. And now I'm going to prepare the plug cord, fit a little grommet to it, so this will look nice in the panel box. Once the hole is cut for this, I'm going to insert the cable, and then I'm going to tie a pretty tight knot in it, and that's going to prevent it from pulling out and ruining all the wires inside. Then everything gets mounted to the panel itself. I use two tiny machine screws with nylock nuts. Next comes the arduous task of soldering all the connections to the various pins. All of the wires on the switch and the transformer are going to have little clasps that get screwed on, and then they're all covered with heat shrink tubing to prevent shorts in the connectors here. I'm pliering on one of the clasps. Once I crimp, I guess is better than pliering. Once I crimp it on, I solder it and then put heat shrink tubing on the connection. And slightly thinner heat shrink tubing on the leads to the transformer. Again, using a heat gun to cinch it down. And finally, attaching the two power leads from the power cord to the switch. And hooking up the transformer.
Got voltage in, switch between one of the plugs and the primaries. So in this example, let's say we have 110 volts coming in. It'll go out to here. It'll power this side of the plug at 110 volts. Send that 110 volts into the transformer, step it up to 220, and send that back out to the other plug. This isn't connected, so nothing will happen here. If it was in reverse, let's say it was plugged into 220, 220 comes in, goes up to the top, powers the top at 220, goes back down to the original, the reverse primary, steps it down to 110, powers this plug at 110, and then these aren't doing anything because they're not connected.
So I just mixed up a little bit of JB weld so the transformer doesn't bounce around. And I'll just stick it down to the bottom of the base. And everything gets closed up, and this box is all finished. Now here I'm going to test it, and you can see when I put the two leads in, the voltage at 123, 124. Flipping the switch will then step it up to 230, which is exactly what I need. Back down to 120. And now, in this case, it's being run as a step-down transformer. About at 63 volts. Being stepped down from 110, and now it's the normal voltage from the wall.
It's all labeled up. Got the input label. This is in step up mode, this is in step down mode. So depending on what voltage that the input is, this is the output voltage for this step up or step down. So right now we're going to have 110 going in, In step-up mode, it'd be 220 volts. If we had 220 going in, it'd be 440 volts. In step-down mode, we'd have 110 in, 55 coming out. If we had 220 in, we'd have 110 coming out. So here, here's the moment of truth. My goal was to have 110 volts come in from the house. Step it up to 220. I can plug in my little shaver, and then, here we go. There it goes. There, it's working. Pretty nice. Now here it's going to be 110, so it won't even really work. Barely even moves there. But at 120, but at 220, that's got a nice shape. My mustache. Let's see. Yep, no hair.